Hello, thanks for joining me. I'm Matthew. This is Career 101, the place where you can come to see a simple version of the various aspects around starting and launching your career, from finding a job to titles and roles to breakdown of various industries. In this session today, we're going to talk about the all-important aspect of a resume. What is a resume and why is it important? You've probably heard of it, but you might not know the basics that go into creating one. So I'll share my screen as always, and we'll get started. So resumes, I think one of the most important aspects you need to think about with a resume is keep it simple. Some people, and to me, that means one page and lots of bullets and not big run on many words that someone has to dissect. One of the things you need to think about with a resume is the audience. This is a written summary of you that can be used as a script by the interviewer for your interview. So keep it simple. If it's really dense, chances are it's not going to get read in the same way as a simple summary. And also keep in mind that if you're competing with 30 other people, someone's probably going to spend in the initial take maybe a minute on your resume, maybe less. I've at times been in situations where I'm looking at 100 resumes and those go pretty quick in terms of the review. So keep it simple. So let's talk about the elements of a resume. You got to have your contact information. Obviously, these days it won't necessarily include an address. It might include a city, state, a cell phone number, an email address, and maybe a link to your LinkedIn page. Definitely have a LinkedIn page if you're doing the job search. Those are easy to create and free. They can often, and I would recommend, a summary and objective statement. And that might be a statement or two, a sentence or two that describes what you're looking for. And it's a way for someone right off the bat to understand a little bit about you and what you're trying to do. You can get more elaborate by doing a cover letter. These days, not that many people do cover letters, but it's a way to distinguish yourself. That might be a full page or a half a page or so. That's a written narrative summary of what you're all about. This is my background, might be this is where I grew up, maybe a struggle you had, maybe something else about what you're looking for, what your background is. Think of it as kind of a mini college essay application, but it's a way to distinguish yourself. But the summary and objective in a resume might be a sentence or two. Then you've got your education and experience. Which goes first? It kind of depends on the stage of life you're at. If you are an active student in university, definitely lead with your education. If you've done something for just a year or two and it wasn't a great fit for you, and you're trying to change industries, maybe you lead with your education. If you've gotten a graduate degree recently, maybe you lead with your education. But it doesn't matter tremendously, but it's an element that comes into it. So within your education, whether first or second, you want to just have simple things like what's your major, and that could be just your major, or it could be the areas of interest that you focused on. You might have said you were a major in marketing, but you were either a minor in a certain other area, or you had a bunch of classes that you also focused on. You want to list any clubs, any sports, any other activities. It's debatable these days how important it is to list your GPA. If you really are an outstanding GPA person and you want to lead with that, sure, go ahead. But I don't think it's necessary these days. If the person interviewing you wants to know it, they can always ask you it. And think of this as going back to the what is a resume's purpose. Remember, this is an interview script. This is a talking point area. And so by listing your clubs or your sports or other focus areas, you may establish some common ground or an area of discussion with the person interviewing you. With your experience, you want to list your internships. It doesn't have to be a paid thing. It could be your volunteer activities. As I talk about in the internship video, you might have only done a couple weeks internship. So just in that case, list summer and the year. And if the person wants to dive in and understand how many weeks you were there, they can do that. But it doesn't have to be the exact months and weeks for that internship on this resume. Volunteer activities are good too. If you had a certain passion throughout your college days of doing something to help, reading in an old person's home or some sort of other thing, list that. That's good to demonstrate there that you're doing something. And then within each role, you really just want to have a simple summary of the role. So it might be one sentence, simple summary, and then maybe some bullets, like 2 or 3 bullets on what you specifically did and what you learned from that. I'd really steer away from I'm going to write 5 sentences or do 10 bullets on it, because you just dilute yourself. Focus on the key things you learned in that. And then I like a skills section. So that might be if there's a software you learn that's specific to that job, that might be helpful. It might be simple things like, you did an Excel training or you did a marketing certification or something like that. That's an area to put in as a whole another section. And then interest. I really like the interest sections. I often start reading a resume by starting at the bottom with the interest sections. That might be sports, arts, hobbies, something that you're interested in outside of your quote unquote career. Reason I like about it is because I often, as an interviewer, someone who's probably interviewed over 100 people, I like to use it as a conversation starter. Something to make us both a little comfortable, start out the conversation a little casually. It does no one any good if if the person being interviewed, you, is coming from a place of being scared and tight and nervous. You want to give the interviewer something to anchor on. And you never know, you might have a bunch of commonality around something. You're both really into chess, or you're both mountain bike riders or something like that. So I would say you really want to keep it to 1 page. I personally don't like reviewing resumes that are multiple pages, especially if you're just starting out your career. There's absolutely no reason you should have multiple pages. If you did something that was unique, you could have kind of a deal sheet or a special project sheet or something as a standalone sheet. But the resume in itself should be 1 page. And I highly recommend using some bullet points. To me, I just do not like looking at a resume that's just full of a bunch of paragraphs that I've got to make my way through. So that's the Resume 101. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've got some basics out of it. Other things you can think about is having a version. If you're thinking about multiple industries, you could have a version for one industry, version for another. Don't forget about file names. Do not just call your resume resume.pdf or resume.doc and send that out. Make sure you put maybe your first initial last name hyphen resume with the date or something like that. Think of the audience that you're sending it to. So that's my basics on resumes. Check out my other videos. I've got them on networking, mentoring, internships, and more to follow. If you like the video, please click the like button, and thank you for joining.